Hey everyone, once again. So thanks for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome. During this interactive speaker panel tonight, we'll cover an important topic of how to search for your first UX job. We have invited some awesome guests who have successfully found their first roles, and actually some of them are hired for quite a few candidates and have tons of experience as well. So who will share the insights from their journeys with you and answer questions. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. It's a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, and without quitting their jobs or other commitments. I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just wanted to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes. So we have run many cohorts, helped probably over 130 people so get hired into UX roles. Here are some companies that they were hired by. So we've seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. So before we jump into the discussion, let's just quickly set the stage and cover a few quick concepts that will help guide the discussion effectively. So you kind of have the bigger picture in mind before we dive in. So if you have been to some of our virtual events before, some of these principles and slides may look familiar. So just bear with us as we want to make sure those who are new to our events also get this quick but very useful overview and the framework that we're using basically. So the new way, starting with the end in mind, right? So understanding where exactly you need to get to be that highly hireable candidate and how exactly you'll get there, right? So essentially what you want to do is you want to UX this whole career transition journey and think from the standpoint of an employer. The new way is basically starting with the end in mind and understanding where exactly you want to get, right? So you want to become a candidate who employers look at and think this is definitely someone who can solve their specific problems and hit the ground running and bring value to our company, right? And they need validation and proof of that you can actually do what they're looking for, right? And when they're recruiting and evaluating your application. So here's a quick overview of the key competencies you need to gain to be that highly hireable candidate. We'll explore these in a bit more detail on the following slides. Essentially, on the left side, you can see kind of more of the learning and building type of competencies. So just hard UX skills, softer skills, real experience, again, less official, but crucial requirement, 3+ UX case studies, comprehensive, sizable case studies. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the other crucial search elements. So portfolio that shows the case study, skills and experience, resume and online presence like LinkedIn, etc. Mastery of effective UX search strategies, and then UX interviewing and storytelling mastery. Okay, so how did we come up with these competencies? Well, definitely not out of thin air. So here's what we did. We interviewed and analyzed hundreds of candidates, identified who had the most success in getting hired fast and why, interviewed at least 30 employers, probably many more by now, and hiring managers to understand what they're looking for, analyzed tons of job postings and basically to understand the most common requirements from employers, ran over 50 events with both candidates and employers and interviewed them and basically gained insights on what works best. So essentially what we did is we used the UX process and did a ton of research to identify the key roadblocks that people experience in this transition journey and gain insight on basically what is needed in order to get, in order to design a better way to solve these problems and make a transition more effectively, right? So then we synthesize all the research and identify the common themes. And again, one of the key takeaways is just starting with the end in mind and clearly understanding like what you need to achieve to be really attractive to employers so you can actually get hired and not just learn a lot of stuff and then get stuck, right? So again, it sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised how many people make this mistake. Understanding how you can become a candidate, right? You know where you need to be, right? So now let's explore a very simple framework for how you can actually get there. Basically, this is the career transition journey at a very high level. So here's this high level overview. First, you just learn the essentials, the foundations of UX, key principles, concepts, the UX process, main methods, deliverables, and the tools. Typically, this is the most straightforward phase and basically the easiest one to do on your own. Next, we call this next major phase practice and grow. This is probably the longest and most practical phase where most of your real learning, skill, and experience building will take place. This phase is mostly about applying, practicing, learning things and in more depth in the process and advancing your skills and building that real experience. The next phase is about creating all the search assets, as we call them. So this essentially involves packaging and presenting all the skills and experience in an effective portfolio, resume, and online presence. Key phase necessary to position yourself as an attractive candidate for your job search. Okay, and the final phase is just search prep and execution, which involves learning and mastering effective search strategies, the UX interviewing process prior to actually kicking off your search. So we found that a lot of people really like this product or service analogy. So basically the first two phases are actually quite similar to like building a product or designing a service. And we call them learn and build stage, as you can see on the left side. The last two phases are very similar to marketing and selling of that product. So that is how we refer to this stage. So essentially the first big mistake that people make is just not building a great product that is attractive to employers, which means you do not develop your skills sufficiently or you do not have any experience. And if the product is not great, it will be very hard, if not impossible, to market and sell it, even if you're a master marketer. The other big mistake people make is basically after they build an amazing product is they do not devote much effort to really understand what marketing and sales is about. They think that just, basically thinking that just having the skills and experience is enough. And then it's just a matter of applying to tons of jobs, right? Meaning they do not really understand any science behind the marketing and sales, which means they do not put enough effort in order to actually position themselves as an attractive candidate, do not learn what effective search strategies are and how to navigate this whole hiring process successfully. And if you do not do that, to be honest with you, you can also get stuck looking for jobs for a very, very long time if you get there at all. Okay, and on this slide, you can basically just see how these key competencies you need to gain map nicely into this simple transition journey. So basically, you can see when you can attain which competences specifically, right? So this is again, very simple slide, very simple framework, but you would be surprised how many people miss this completely and kind of get stuck, do things backward, and basically waste months or even years because of that. And this is essentially like a high-level overview of what you need to have to be that highly hireable candidate and when you can attain that. Okay. So just some of the key points, starting with the end in mind, understanding where you need to get to be that hireable candidate by potential employers and how you'll get there. Ensure you have that solid product before starting to sell. Otherwise, you can waste a lot of time. Once you have a solid product, it is key to learn, practice, and apply the principles and best practices behind marketing and selling in order to get hired faster, right? And do not confuse what phase you're in, right? To understand where you are and what may be blocking you from making progress, and focus on what is most important at the moment specifically. And do not spread yourself too thin, doing too much. Basically, it's one time, right? As that will yield very little progress. Okay, so that's it in terms of our quick overview and setting the stage, because that will kind of help you see the entire journey, right? Now to the most fun part, actually interviewing the folks who have recently successfully made this UX transition or have tons of experience and have hired candidates into their first UX roles. We'll mostly discuss the search phase of that career transition journey, where you prepare for and execute that search, and the search asset creation phase, where you basically focus on portfolio, resume, online presence, and basically how you package what you have done to position yourself well to employers. And we may also touch on the practice and grow phase, softer skills, hard skills, experience, and case studies, right? So let's start with some quick introductions of our awesome guests. So do you guys want to tell the audience a bit about yourselves and maybe like 30 to 60 seconds or so?
All right, I'll jump in. My name is Darren Amelio. I'm an experienced lead with Publicis Sapient. I've been in experience design and UI design for a good 15 plus years, working in many different aspects of it, from UI to UX to information architecture. And currently I'm in a lead role where I do a lot of the hiring. Hence, that's why I'm here to try to help answer some of the questions that you potentially may have.
Hi, this is Linda. My full name is Tianyu Yang, but it's okay, you call me Linda. I was an international student and I studied digital media design for learning. I saw one of my alumni. I graduated from NYU. So I'm like used to working in a school, and then I transferred to the UX. So I could help to answer some like visa related questions, like for especially for international students. And I do have some experience in the first time searching because I did it twice. A couple years ago and a year ago. And also I'm currently located in San Jose and working as an UX designer and also do some interviewing jobs.
Hi, everyone. I'll go next. My name is Melissa, and currently I'm working at Cisco. I've transitioned into UX design a few years back, and current role is a senior UX designer at Cisco. So happy to help out and answer any questions.
Hi, I'm Stacy Pearson. I'm a senior UX designer at Verisk. I transitioned from a marketing and design role, so nice UI experience there. And right now in my role, I'm doing the full, from research to development, to handing it off to development. So all phases of the UX process.
Thank you, Stacy. Awesome. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining. Really appreciate it. Great to have you here. So before we jump into the details of job searching, how do you actually know if you're ready for that job search and if it actually makes sense to start it?
Well, for me, my situation is a little bit tricky. I quit my previous job, so I was like a full-time looking for a UX job. Once I have my portfolio ready, once I have my resume ID ready. So when I mean portfolio ready is like a first version. It means I have at least 3 projects to show, and but I may still need some time to tweak the work to make it looks good. But as far as I have 3 there, I start like sending out my resume. I start applying because it takes time to get feedback. So that's for me. Like if you really want a job very soon, so you could start as soon as you have those hard resume and the 3 projects ready. You can start that. But at the same time, you need to still working on your projects and to make it looks perfect.
Thank you, Linda. What do you guys? What do others think? Stacy, Darren, Melissa.
I think if you're talking about when you're ready to, you want to transition out of your current field into UX. I think you've probably done a little bit of research, know that that's probably something that speaks to the path that you want to start on, and only you really can answer that question for yourself. I mean, I think if that's where you were going with that question, Michael, you mean when do you know that you want to actually start in UX, or were you asking something a little more specific?
Yeah, when do you know if it actually makes sense to kick off your search, right? Like maybe you just took a Udemy course and you don't have a portfolio. Does it make sense to search for UX jobs? Or maybe you have 10 case studies or something like that.
Yeah, then I would agree with Linda. I think you have to have at least some type of case study developed and likely an online presence, whether it's a portfolio of sorts, and be able to speak to that in a way that feels like it's authentic and you actually know, you can talk through your decision making and your processes and why you were successful, maybe some roadblocks you ran into. I think that it's great to have this stuff. You need this stuff, the artifacts to present, but you also need to be able to talk about your decision making and your choices and the why behind it. Otherwise, it's I think when you're talking to hiring managers, et cetera, it's going to feel a little bit like you're talking about something that you don't fully understand.
Thank you, Stacy. So let me ask this from a little bit in a different side, and maybe get input from the other folks as well. In terms of becoming that highly attractive candidate to employers, right? So to make your job search effective, right? You need to basically first prepare and package your work, right? So you're that attractive candidate, right? So what do you think is necessary to become that attractive candidate? What is the most important part or the most important parts?
I think that, well, the first thing is, and just based on what Linda was saying, you need at least 3 case studies at the very least. And always keep in mind that you're not in the room to describe or walk through your case study with the person that's looking at it. So referring to what Stacy was just putting at was that you need to be able to keep it simple, your case study that is, make it clear that you can demonstrate the rationale behind your design decision making. You know, people are, when someone's looking at your portfolio, they're looking at the way that you problem solve. And it's important for you to kind of help whomever's looking at the portfolio understand the rationale behind that decision making and your approach to doing it. You want to keep your case studies not too long, because you want someone to be able to go in, quickly glance at it, understand it, and see the artifacts. And then making sure that you use the right terminology. You want to be able to use that taxonomy and what are the basic terms or how you refer to an experience. That actually has to be surfaced through your case study, and as well as when you're on an interview. So that would carry through, just so that, and that's that feeling of confidence. So when the first question you asked is like, when do you feel that you're ready? So you feel that you're ready when you can actually talk to the work and feel a little bit confident in explaining your decision making, but in the terminology that is standard in the industry.
Thank you, Darren. So do you guys also have any additional thoughts? Melissa, maybe? I think you haven't
Yeah.
spoken about it yet.
No, yes, I was going to say that everyone, you know, has great points. And I think it's important that you have to understand that when you are applying for a position at a company, it goes through different stages. So, you know, first you have to kind of pass a hiring manager, and then you might get passed over to another potentially like a project manager before you actually get to, you know, meet or even speak to like a design team. So that's another thing I think that's important that you have to keep in mind, because a lot of the times, you know, the case study itself will be reviewed by multiple people. And, you know, for instance, I think that sometimes, you know, hiring managers, they don't have, you know, design background knowledge, for example. Some do, some don't. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, especially when you're presenting your work, because to Darren's point, you have to be very clear and concise with how you're presenting. And then obviously storytelling, it's very important as well. And I think those are like very important things that you have to kind of understand when you start applying for positions as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. And by the way, I already see some of you guys in the audience already starting to type in some questions in Q&A. Awesome work. Keep those coming. We'll again pause a few times to address more of those. We have our own questions prepared, of course, and we'll probably cover most of what interests you, right? Because it's like a very comprehensive event, very comprehensive discussion. But yeah, please keep those coming. Before we jump on to the next question, do you guys have any additional thoughts in terms of like what makes an effective candidate and how to prepare, what's most important before even kicking off your search? Any additional quick thoughts?
I would like to add on that. I think also, you know, having a strategy of before you start applying, like what are you applying to? And that goes in the realms of like industry, for instance, understanding what the ask is for these roles. So, you know, that requires you to really kind of look into detail of what exactly is the position, because sometimes even the titles don't correlate with what the duties are. So I think if you approach it from a strategic standpoint and you pay attention to those nuances, but then you yourself are prepared in terms of like knowing what industry you want to be in, exactly what you want to do. I think that's also important as well, because otherwise you can just go on an endless search and look at so many different positions and, you know, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. So I think that's a good way to kind of find, you know, make the list a little bit shorter for yourself as well.
I think there's just one other thing, and now that I'm looking at Melissa, and I know that she came out of a fashion background once upon a time, you know, if you're transitioning from another role, such as fashion, for example, then you might consider looking for a role within e-commerce or fashion, just because it find ways to bridge your past experience into what you might want to be transitioning into in a UX role. Like if you worked in finance, maybe working in fintech might be a nice bridge or transition from, you know, what you previously did into going into your UX role. So think about making those connections.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, those are great points. And that's a good transition to the next question. Is basically about, as you guys may remember, so that experience elements, right, is obviously key. So can you guys give some tips how to build work experience when most employers are already looking for candidates with 2 to 3 years or, you know, some experience, right? So any tips you guys have?
Think about the, you know, I guess the design thinking process where you're empathizing. That's a skill that you use in UX. How can you take that skill from your previous job and reframe it in that in a UX perspective? Your ideation, how you did that in your previous job, how can you reframe that in your, whether it's on your portfolio or your resume or even in LinkedIn, to reflect that skill set that you've developed in a previous job? For a UX perspective moving forward. So you likely have a lot of the skills that you'll be using in your UX career developed already. It's just a matter of sort of shifting the perspective and framing that experience, you know, as your experience in UX. Even though it's not necessarily directly connected with the UX role, it still is vital experience where you have learned these skills. And then simply just frame it that way when you're discussing it and when you're putting it on your LinkedIn or in your resume, because it goes a long way of saying you have the experience. You don't need to start over again. You know, you have that foundation. So that would be some of my advice.
Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah, I think that, for example, if you're a bartender, you work with a lot of people, you know, you're able to understand and empathize, and, you know, really being able to identify different types of personas. So you can start to create personas from people that walk in, or if you're worked in the restaurant industry, you're able to identify different types of people and put them into personas. So there's aspects of what you do in your current role that, to Stacy's point, that carry over, that can translate. Do you problem solve? Are you thinking through? Are you connecting? Is there a way that you're connecting a flow from a start to finish? You know, think about, there's a lot of things that you're probably doing already that actually help inform or support, you know, you moving into a UX role.
Thank you, Darren. Any other thoughts in terms of experience building? Because of course, you can mention beginnings as well, but we'll talk about it in the end, because it could be a great opportunity for some of the folks in the audience. But because we allow you to do that. But besides the program, of course, there are plenty of ways to kind of build that experience, right? You can volunteer, you can do pro bono projects, you can try to freelance, right? Just kind of under the same volunteering and pro bono work umbrella. You can also try to do internships, right? That can be hit or miss, right? If you can find a great one, right, that can be very useful. It's just basically difficulty is often they're mainly open to college students, right? And then the great ones are sometimes can be as hard to get as jobs, but that's definitely a great, could be a great option to do that. So any additional tips you guys want to give? I know it looks like Linda, you're unmuted. Did you want to give some tips on that?
Yeah, so I would say we can think why they required those like experience. Like I was like looking for jobs last year, and I always see like at least 3 years experience and the things like that. And then I was trying to see like when people are hiring a UX designer, they are trying to find someone to work with. So they do not want to like so the companies, they would want someone like they could like start from the first day like with some experience. And some companies, so in that case they will say like we want like 3 years experience. But for some positions, even though they say 3 years, they also like would like to give opportunities to like someone just graduate with like a very limited like real life experience. Or some companies, they may like thinking, even though they say 3 years experience, they may like in their mind they want looking for someone with more experience. It's very hard to tell. But what we can do is like we need to show on our resume and on our portfolio that like we are like a very good UX designer. We have that ability to do that job. That's what we can do. And also, based on my experience, is that the first round screen, like your resume, like usually is not the hiring manager to go through that. Usually it's the HR, they will go through that. So like what they really looking for, they're looking for keywords. So that means you need to really read the job descriptions. You need to understand what these companies are looking for, and you provide that like on your resume. And then at least get first round, talk to HR, and then get to the next round. But at the same time, like if you like Stacy said, like you can build up like you use your own backgrounds and to for the UX for the UX like the experience. Also like Michael said, like you could like looking for some startups, you are offering free job, like I can do something for you for free, so you could gain some experience. All those things I would consider like as some like experience. If you have done 3 projects, I would consider like at least you have 2 years experience. Why don't try to apply for those like 3-year experience like jobs? Like I would say like give yourself a try and still like build up your skills. Like that's also very important, because I was saying like recently our company was looking for a UX designer which required 3 years experience, but in the last round I still see someone like just graduate from school. Like we want to consider her because she has very good skills. So that means don't like be freaked out by those like years. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's because often it's important to basically have that check mark of having some real experience, right? But when they say 2 to 3 years, they may not be able to find someone with 2 to 3 years for that particular role and that particular pay level and everything, right? So basically you want to just not be afraid of that and not take those job descriptions too literally, right? You have to analyze it, right? And try to become kind of build yourself up the best you can, and kind of have all those competencies that we went over earlier. But again, don't be afraid of, just, it doesn't have to be perfect, basically. Any other tips, guys, about experience?
I think, there is this kind of fear of getting started, and imposter syndrome. Let's just call that out, right? Can I do that? And I think, at least for me, when I first started in the industry, what I had done was just transition to a really easy role. And I know that was important. It wasn't the money that I was hoping to earn or pay the bills, or really support myself with. But what it did allow me was to be able to learn the ways of working, to understand the process, to be able to really understand, what it is that I would be doing on a day-to-day basis and really start to get comfortable with that. And that was my springboard into moving into another role. Literally it was like 6 months later, when I felt more comfortable. I knew the dynamics. So that's always something to consider. I know it's really hard is because people have to pay the bills. So, there's that fine line between, how can I enter and at what level can I enter the industry at? So, but that's just one consideration. Taking 3 steps back to go 5 steps forward.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, that's definitely a great point as well. I think there's some mistake, the mistake some people make is basically doing these like tiny freelance projects, a ton of them, right? And maybe I can help with, with your skills a little bit. And but in reality, and you can make a few $100 or something like that, right? But in reality, basically, just to synthesize it, right? Instead of doing big comprehensive UX projects on pro bono base on volunteering, you chase after those a few $100 freelance gigs that just focus on like one narrow area of the UX process. And in the end, you can just waste much more time that way, right? Yes, you will make a few $1,000 maybe, but it can still take much longer to actually get to that high paying full-time UX role that you're looking for, right? So it's basically keep that in mind. That's a mistake that we've seen many people make as well. What are you talking about mistakes? So what are some of your guys' biggest mistakes and lessons related to UX portfolios and case studies?
I think, well, in terms of, I wouldn't call it necessarily mistakes, but I think that portfolios that are just too long, if you're wanting to go into UX research, or if you just want to be a general UX generalist and your portfolio is primarily all research, at least for me, when I'm hiring somebody, I need someone to come in and start creating wireframes right away and start to think about, creating flows. If that's something that's just kind of minimized in your portfolio, it's hard for me to really create that relationship between you and the work that you would need to step into and hit the ground running. So when you're creating your portfolio, think more specifically about what aspect or area of UX do you want to move into? Is it more of a UX generalist? Is it more of the research? Or maybe you find yourself transitioning from, a visual or marketing designer, and maybe a UI designer might be the better role. So I think the bigger thing is to kind of think about first, what is the role that you really want? Identify that and make sure that your storytelling is in your portfolio is wrapped around that's more specifically. And I could keep going on, but I think I'll turn it over to someone else and I could jump back in.
Thank you, Darren.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Melissa, do you want to go next?
Oh, you can go ahead.
I think the thing that I've seen that I think might be a mistake is to throw a bunch of artifacts in a portfolio without outlining the decision-making processes that got you to that artifact and how that helped you solve the problem and who you were solving the problem for. So the thinking and the decisions around your work is really important, because the people that are doing the hiring need to know that it's not just pumping out, outputs, that you really need to be focused on the outcome of the user and the problem you're solving. So I would say that's something that I've run into that I think is a mistake, just throwing a bunch of artifacts into a portfolio without showing the decision making and rationale behind them.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Definitely having your portfolio organized, keeping in mind that, you know, the storytelling aspect behind the work is really important. And then also, you know, think about how you're not only, you know, explaining your process, but also what are the ways that you can show from a visual perspective, like whatever assets you have. I think it's also important to, you know, not just be so heavy copy, but also you need to break things up a little bit and, you know, implement visuals that are, you know, really clearly laid out, and also be able to not be like blurry or anything. Like you have to make it, obviously, you know, we are UX designers, but at the same time, you have to make it, in a sense, a little bit visual appealing in a sense, in order to depict or to really explain your story, because you're going to have a lot of different individuals kind of look through your portfolio within the hiring process, I'll like, you know, quote unquote phases. So just keep that in mind as well. It's a balancing act, essentially.
I think it's about also, you know, think about if it's a website or if it's a mobile product, how does it function? Why does it function that way? When you start to break it apart, how do you annotate that? How do you call out these key areas that you want to call attention to that was unique or that was part of your problem solving? And you know, that is something that you're just going to have to make sure that you're annotating or you're highlighting or you're creating what you call an explosion, or you zoom in on a key area for someone to really focus on. You know, just once again, you're not going to be in the room to explain to whomever's looking at your portfolio. So it's important that you create the visual for that. Sorry, that's my dog in the background.
Should get her on the panel as well. Thank you, Darren. Linda, I think you unmuted yourself again, right? Do you have any other mistakes you made or lessons you learned about regarding your portfolio?
Yeah. So I not just a portfolio. I made a lot of mistakes. Like I said, because I quit my previous job, I have a very short time. I start very once I have everything done, I start my job searching. So my first mistake is my portfolio doesn't, my resume does not look good. So that's block me from a lot of opportunities. So first thing, find at least 20 or 30 portfolios online and quickly screen those portfolios, and you could quickly tell, just act as an interviewer. That's the word. So you could tell which portfolio is good, which portfolio is not good. Just take 5 seconds to go through those 30 or 20 portfolio resumes, I'm sorry, and then try to learn why those resumes looks good, and revise your resumes and have someone to go through your resumes to check if there's any mistakes or grammar mistakes, all those things. So have a good resume is very important. It will get you past the HR screening. And the second mistake I made is I didn't really practice myself for the interviews. So there are presentations. So there are app critics and whiteboard challenges during the hiring process. I didn't at the beginning, I didn't really practice myself. So I just wait for that day and I start doing all the challenges. And I was lost in my mind. I either speak too fast or I didn't focus on the main point. So try to avoid this mistake. Do practice to present your portfolio, and try to do some whiteboard challenges. You could find those whiteboard challenges problem and time yourself, and at least have someone your friends or your families to listen to your presentation and listen to you practice, and they will give you feedbacks. And the last and another mistake I could say is my portfolio, because I was like everyone here, I did not have any real life UX design experience when I was looking for this job. So my portfolio, I use all my begin next projects, and also like at school, like projects. So like one of my friend, she was like a senior UX designer. She told me like my portfolio looks like exactly like everyone there. Like you have everything there, like from the beginning to the end. But I could not tell like where's your thought, like why do you make this decision, and what like struggles have you made, and also like have you any like a first round and the second round of design, and how to go to the last. And when like we were like hiring, like we really want to see how you make your design decisions. That's like also a very important part. And I was like my design pictures very like a blur, and she was like, do you want the people really like look at your design, or like you just like want to use a blur image or graphic there? So that's like very important. If you have really good designs, like show it clearly on your portfolio website.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, these are great points. I also want to take a few quick questions from the audience to make this, again, as interactive, as real life as possible. So Jenny is asking, when looking for my first role, should I focus on junior positions? And I have some thoughts on that, which I'll share after you guys. I'll let you guys chime in first.
I think it depends on what where you're coming from, right? Personally, like, or excuse me, individually. So for example, like in my case, I transitioned from UX to, from fashion design into UX design. You can't necessarily like throw away an entire career experience because you're making the decision to change your career path, So I think it depends on an individual basis, but like someone like myself, I was not looking for junior level positions. So I would say definitely, if you have, previous like work experience, don't throw all your experience down the drain because, you're transitioning into a different career field. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you're, fresh out of college, starting off in the working industry, then I would say, yeah, you should focus your search on a junior level position. So I think it depends on a case by case basis, essentially.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, these are good points. I mean, I am biased, of course, right? Because our company basically helps you become more marketable, right? And basically build yourself up and become less junior in a way, right? So, but our philosophy is that because based on our research, there are not too many pure like junior UX roles, right? So instead of trying to look for that 5% of the market, why not build yourself up and have some of those, have better portfolio, have better case studies, have more experience by doing what we just discussed, right? And basically build yourself up, and then you open up the market much more, the job market, to yourself, right? And you don't market yourself as a junior designer, right? And this typically works much better, right? Because if you keep marketing yourself as junior person, typically based on our experience, it's not very effective usually. Any advice for designers / marketers wanting to move into a user experience research role? So it's a pretty broad question, I would say, right? And I don't know if you guys have any specific tips for designers and marketers looking to move into user research, but I would say it's basically very similar advice as advice we give to others, like non-designers or marketers who are looking to basically gain those key competencies, right? Do you guys want to add anything? It might be hard, right? Because I'm not sure if any of you are actual like research focused just on research.
I think maybe I could potentially answer this question. If you are currently in a role that is marketing or designer and you're looking to transition into UX research, if your current company is you can speak with your existing company to see, have a candid conversation about like, oh, hey, like I want to like explore, possibly transitioning and into a UX role, or for instance, within the company itself, you could actually start to initiate that on your own and then show the benefits to your manager, of why it's important that we should implement UX research within our company. I think those are maybe two items I think I could, highlight as an idea within a company structure.
Thank you,
And also-
Melissa.
Also when you say, I know that you might be a designer on the marketing side, but who is the target audience? Who are you marketing to? What are the demographics? What are the metrics or the impact of the designs that you made? Was there a click through or the NPR score? Like, what can you do that there's something tangible or some kind of takeaway where there actually may already be a bridge between what you're doing now and, once again, moving into a research role. So look for those commonalities or where things overlap.
Thank you, Darren. Also want to take George's question as well. How important is it to have a portfolio that is tailored to a specific industry? So George, just to kind of quickly chime in on that, based on our experience and research, it's not as crucial as having the more functional UX experience, right? So we had, for example, in our case, grads from with projects and case studies focused on different industries, right? Who lands roles that's in a completely different industry, right? So basically, it wasn't as crucial, even though some recruiters might be, because they're looking for check marks sometimes, and they might be looking for this industry experience, that industry experience. But what do you guys think? How important is it to have a portfolio that is tailored to a specific industry?
I don't think it's important. And I agree with everything you said, but alternatively, is there something that excites you? Is there something that motivates you? And once again, I was referring to fashion earlier, and so did Melissa. Maybe fashion excites you and maybe you specifically want to gear around that, or maybe you're the medical industry and you want to work into med tech, or there's just aspects of a certain area or vertical that really interest you. Then you might consider creating a specific type of portfolio. But if not, I defer right back to what Michael just said. It comes down to preference.
Thanks, Darren.
Yeah,
Stacy?
I do have something to add to that. I think the portfolio is probably more of a general, this is me, you get to know a little bit of my work, let's have a conversation. The case study, I think if you're looking for a specific type of role, that's where you want to focus that case study, that presentation of that case study to a specific role. So if you get to the point where someone in a specific industry looking for a specific type of work, then yeah, absolutely tailor that case study to speak to their needs and that industry. But portfolios, I would say that sounds to me like a lot of work and a lot of iterative, updating your portfolio. You're going to update it for this industry. Maybe you want to look into a different industry and you have to update that or hide pages. I would say the case study seems more specific. The portfolio seems more general.
Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that is that the process is the same. How you go about solving those iterative steps that you're going to take, whether it's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, or if you're like thinking this away, discover, design, develop, deliver, that process is the same. And then how you apply that to any different industry, and this keeps going back to what Stacy said. It's about having that rationale behind your design decision making. That is what is the most important, and you should be able to apply that to just about any industry that you work in. And then once again, more specifically, if a certain industry excites you, then yeah, you could reflect that in a particular case study, and that will help you move into that industry.
Thank you, Darren. So here's another question I think probably quite a few of you guys in the audience may be interested in. Initially, do you feel it might be better to focus on certain types of companies, basically for your first job search, like either tech startups, maybe product companies, maybe services companies and agencies, or technology departments within bigger corporations? Do you have any thoughts on that, on whether it makes sense to focus on a specific type of company?
Well, I could say like you should know like which industry or like your preference, and you should also list your dream companies, but do not have like to apply those jobs in a rush, and try some other like now that that dream company is first, because you need to practice. You can't like apply a job and then you get it. You need some practice. So I would say like if you have time, yes, like first like find out which industry you're interested in, and then also like applies for those jobs. Like you may not that interested, but you think it's also acceptable, also do that. So that it won't hurt. Like you can at least gain some experience for the interviews, and then you could like start like applying for your dream companies, and then like your dream industry, and that would be very helpful. Yeah, that's like my thoughts.
Thank you, Linda. What about others? Did you have did you apply to and kind of get connected with all types of companies, or did you really want to focus on specific types of companies, corporations, tech departments within corporations, or products, tech companies, or something else?
I think, it's an interesting question. I think it's not the type of company, but best case scenario, you're joining a place where there's, the UX maturity is to a point where you have people that you can learn from and mentor from. And I think that is probably more important than whether it's a Fortune 500 company versus, this many people, or it's a startup, because even those specific types of companies may not have the kind of culture or infrastructure that can support, from a UX perspective, that can support your needs and that can really help you learn and grow as a UX professional. So I probably would advise to not focus so much on a type of company, but do a little more research on the team within the company, and if that's a team that you feel that you can learn and grow from.
Thank you, Stacy. So here's a question that's probably like everyone has in terms of search methodologies, right? Or we call them channels, right? Like in marketing, like basically your channels that you use. Which ones are your favorites and why? And just to clarify the question a little bit, right? What I'm referring to is like applying on company sites versus applying on job boards or like LinkedIn, reaching out to recruiters, networking, informational interviews, friends, social networks. What channels worked best for you and why?
Well, that's a hard question. I've tried them all. Over time, I felt that working with recruiters was the best option for me. I have applied through LinkedIn directly, reaching out directly to recruiters. It's always good when you know somebody who works within a company and who can actually help create those introductions or recommendations, or at least help you get a foot in the door to getting at least an interview. It makes no guarantee that you're going to get hired, but at least there's a consideration. So if you do know someone, I think that is a really great start. If there's companies that you want to work for, then, and I'm sure Michael could talk to you about the LAMP method, but I think that I've looked at companies that I want to work for, and if I don't know anyone, then what I typically do is try to stalk people within the company on LinkedIn, find who the recruiters are, and apply for the open roles, but reach out sometimes directly and in a way that's in a off-putting way. It's like, hey, is there any open roles that you think that I might be a good fit for, that and can you point me in a direction of where I should be applying or something? So at least I make that connection. I've done that. But once again, for me, I think I've been most successful with establishing relationship with at least 2 or 3 recruiters. There's a lot of crappy recruiters out there, so be really careful. But once I found the 2 or 3 that really are some that are looking out for my best interests and know the industry, it's been the best for me.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, that's a great question. So question specifically for you then, since you have a ton of experience and you hired that many other people, right? If we look from the other side, right, which channels did you use to actually bring people on board and hire people? Like, did you also work with recruiters, or what was like the most common method?
I work with recruiters, but because there's a process within the company, but there are times where I have the flexibility where I reach out to my network and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for someone who is a badass in Figma and really understands design systems, and I need them to get in here right away. Or we're working on a particular, problem that we're trying to solve. Do you know anyone who can actually, is available that can step in the next few weeks? So I'll reach out to my network, and that's 6 degrees of separation, and see what happens. Otherwise, definitely it's, we work, the agency I work at works with recruiters. They hand them to it's like 3-step process. The recruiters give it to resource managers. The resource managers whittle those down, and then will just give me the 10 to 25 portfolios to review.
Thanks, Darren. So what about others? What were your favorite methods for search, and what actually worked?
Yeah, for me, since I do not have like too many years of working experience, and I do not very like a strong networking or social skills, but I have to say, if you could find some like referrals, if you could find like you alumni and you could know someone in that company could refer you, that would be the best way and the most efficient way. Also, I also feel that for the when you are looking for your first UX job, this way may be not that effective, since like you are as other people, do not have too much experience there. Like at least I feel like for some, like I have referred someone, and I also like ask someone to refer me. But if you do not have very good skills, and even though you got referred, it's not guaranteed you get this job. And for me, I use LinkedIn or like other like board a lot, and my experience is that if this job has been posted over a week, then you don't waste time on that, because like once like they open a job, they will receive like a lot of like applications within like a couple of days. And if you see this job has been on the market for over a week or like 2 weeks, then probably this has been filled. And I would like recommend people to like set up an alert or really check those like new like within a day or within 3 days post jobs and apply that. I usually get like a really good positive feedbacks from those like jobs, and that's like I find my job by like just applying on regular online. So if you do not have any like networks, and if you like can't find anyone in that company you want to go, so just try this method. It also like works.
Thank you, Linda. Stacy, Melissa, it's an important question. I want to know what worked for you.
I have to say, I did a little bit of everything. Darren brought up some great points. I've worked with some recruiters. I've gone on directly on the company website itself and applied directly there. And usually that worked for me a lot in the past. And then also there was alternative sites besides, you know, the typical LinkedIn. I know there's a site or a blog called Built In, and they're like throughout the United States, like in key city areas, and they have like postings for jobs as well. Also, I kind of went through Glassdoor because also, you know, one great thing about Glassdoor is that you're able to kind of see reviews from other employees about the company itself. And that kind of gives you a little bit more insight of, you know, potentially like what the company culture is, how do people within the industry feel about it? And I think that's also important as well, because if you don't want to, you want to work for a company that, you know, not only do you get to learn and expand, but you also want to work for a company that's also, you know, great company culture, great with their employees, and just having that insight in your bucket is also important, because that can help you kind of make your decisions as well on your path to like looking for a position. And on another note, also in regards to LinkedIn, sometimes like I would just reach out to fellow UX designers and just, I mean, obviously don't approach it as kind of like, oh, any jobs at your company, but, you know, as a UX designer, like ask questions about the company, you know, show interest. I think, you know, reach out with, you know, like general questions about the company itself, not so much about the position. And I think, you know, a majority of people that I've interacted with, they're very open to talk about, you know, the company, what they're doing, what their role is. And I've never received any like negative or like no responses. Everyone always responds, because everyone's, you know, we're always happy to answer questions, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Stacy.
Yeah, I've had my best luck working within my network, and for a couple of reasons. I think there's that ease of having a bit of relationship, and that does take a little bit of the pressure off as far as the nervous pressure. So, you know, it tends to be a little bit easier to talk through everything that you've learned and all your decisions when you're not so stressed out. So there's that. But I also feel, and I know I keep harping on this, but you do have a better idea of what to expect with the job that you're applying for, because there are those insights around, you know, how people talk about UX at that company, what UX means to them. And the reason I'm using air quotes is because I've had quite a few encounters where I've seen postings for UX positions, but it's really, it's just not it's not a UX role. It's more of a prototyping role to validate for stakeholders, which does not necessarily include users. So I'm saying that as if you work within your network, you get insights into the job itself, and you also have the you have a little bit of a relationship so that you can easily present a little more easily your work and describe it, and it feels, the questions feel a little bit more natural. And I've always had my best success when talking to my network. Even by mistake, it ended up working out. Like I wanted to practice presenting my portfolio to a friend in my network. They invited their boss, and when I was practicing with the two of them, their boss offered me a job. So it's like those impromptu kind of scenarios where, you know, you're not, the pressure's off, and you can really describe what you're working on. You can describe your process. There's something easier about that, from my perspective, that makes it a little more of a human connection.
Yeah, that's awesome, Stacy. I love that story, by the way. So yeah, and just to kind of recap, so based on our own kind of surveying of lots of people, usually most folks found jobs through either networking or recruiters reaching out to them, right? So, which means that, and by networking, it means either they already had a personal connection, right? Or they were just reaching out, doing informational interviews, building relationships. Again, going to mention this book that I talk about all the time. I should probably already start getting some kind of affiliate commission or something, but it's called 2-Hour Job Search, and I'm not affiliated, at least not yet. 2-Hour Job Search by Steve Dalton. So obviously the job search is not going to take you 2 hours, but the initial setup of that job search system is going to take 2 hours. It's a really great book, like how to process book, how to do informational interviews with details, even like when to reach out, what to say, how to structure the calls or meetings, and how to follow up, when to, etc. Really good, basically. We use that methodology in our accelerator and basically help people create these like LAMP lists. You can learn more in that book if you want. But it's basically, yeah, personal connection or reaching out to others. So networking, that's the vast majority of folks who we surveyed. That's how they landed their jobs. LinkedIn can work sometimes too. Or obviously recruiters reaching out to them, right? But in order for that to happen, you need to have an amazing portfolio, first of all, and you need to have a great resume and LinkedIn profile, right? So that comes back to those creating all those search assets that are in top shape, right? So, so just wanted to kind of synthesize that. Job boards, by the way, those can be great, not for just searching and applying to like thousands of jobs, but to have to understand whether a company is hiring, and then you can network your way into it, right? So basically, first you research and see like which companies have more activity on those job boards, and then you try to network your way in and maybe do like informational interviews, etc. So next question that is, I think, going to be interesting for lots of people to find out, and then we're going to take some more questions from the audience as well. By the way, I love that we have lots of questions there, so keep those coming. We'll try to address as many of them as possible. What do you think were some of your biggest challenges on the way to your first UX job, and how did you overcome those?
That's a great question.
You mean after we got hired or before we got hired or got hired or?
Before.
Challenges, I would say definitely the beginning stages. You know, I mentioned before, and this is my personal experience, like I mentioned before, like, you know, you go through hiring stages within different people within the company. And, you know, I think one of the challenges was like, you know, with a hiring manager who doesn't have like, you know, the design insight, for instance, or where you're in an interview with a hiring manager, and then one little word they can just focus on, and it throws off your entire your entire job application. And it's like you have to really be conscious or very, very mindful of how you're explaining your role or even your past experience. And then also being able to quickly adapt and change based on those previous, you know, interviews that you have. So if I can give you a great example would be, you know, transitioning into the career. One of the things that really stood out to me was during an interview I had where they were asking me about my background, you know, design background. And then I mentioned like, you know, like working in fashion, you know, in fashion, you deal with like products, you design, you research, you ideate, you know, all the base things that technically you would do in a UX role. The only difference is that it's a physical product, and versus, you know, like a web experience, for instance. And the hiring manager just couldn't see past the fact that it's like an actual physical product, and that like tossed out like the entire like interview itself. And so from there, you know, learnings, you know, you kind of have to rephrase how, or you know, be very mindful of how you're explaining things, because it could just really, really toss people for a loop. Like they just can't see past certain things because they don't have that I would say, the design background, for example.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for sharing. So does anyone else want to share their biggest challenges and lessons on the way to that first job?
I think for me, when I first started out, was imposter syndrome. I was nervous as hell. I remember that I tried to hone in and focus on, for me, it was just, I interned creating information architecture, site maps, and a lot of wireframes. So I just kept practicing and creating wireframes, and I just know that I wanted to come in the door with something that I felt really proficient at. So I honed in on learning that one key aspect, which I knew that I would probably doing the most of. And I know that when I got hired, it was a lot more than I expected. And I got hired on a Friday. So I knew that I had Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday to like YouTube the hell out of things. So when I went back to work on Monday, I felt like I was in a better position. And I think the key thing for me is I got hired. And I forced myself to learn as much as I can along the way. But it is a hard thing, you know, is coming through the door with, you know, possibly not enough experience. And I think that's always just a big fear. And that was my fear, but obviously I survived and I kept going at it and I kept learning and I never just turned back. And I think that's my advice to all of you. If this means a lot to you, and if this is like an industry that really makes you curious, fascinates you, challenges you to want to problem solve, motivates you, don't give up. Really, it's up to you. It's how determined you are, and if you're so determined, it's gonna happen. You know, and it may take some trial and error. And to Melissa's point, maybe you go on an interview, make notes of that interview, what went wrong, go back and see what you do on the next time around. And Michael's heard me say this a lot. I've gone on interviews for jobs that I don't want, just to practice, you know, and to practice. And I keep little Post-its on the side of my screen, since we can interview remotely now and have those conversations remotely. I have those talking points there and I'm able to like refer back to those. And I think that's actually just helped me with a little bit of confidence. So I know that I've digressed, but you know, the key thing is just don't give up, you know, and keep learning.
Thank you for sharing, Darren. So, and let's take, actually, I think Linda wanted to say something. So let's hear Linda, and then I want to take a couple of questions from the audience. I know Shiva asked a question that has 7 upvotes. So again, please keep upvoting those questions so that we know what you guys are most interested in, and we address kind of the most popular questions. So I want to address that in a second.
So I just want to say I can't agree more with Darren that my huge problems during the interview, especially during the interview process, I'm not confident enough that I could get this job. And right now, the hiring process could last a month or 2. And there are so many stages. And for when I was like interviewing for my current job, like I thought I did really bad during my design challenge. So I wasn't expecting anything like after the design challenge. And I was talking to my friend as I lost this opportunity. I've been trying so hard, and then I was really down for a few days. I didn't do anything during those days. But actually I got it. So that means don't like question yourself, like always be confident. And like, even though you thought you didn't do it well, but just keep doing things you need to do. Just keep applying, just keep practicing, and then like you will finally get a job. You will finally get a UX job.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, these are great points. Essentially, yeah, that's what we learned over time as well, right? If you have a good roadmap, right, even as simple as the one that we just showed, right, and you keep going, right, and you keep building yourself up, it's eventually it's pretty much unavoidable, right, that you will get hired. It's usually, like, at least in our case, like with our own like students, typically when people do not get hired is when they change their mind, right? Maybe they decide they don't want to do UX, which doesn't happen very frequently at all, or they give up for some reason, right? Which doesn't happen too frequently either. But again, I think you guys mentioned these like really good points in terms of just keep going, not give up. Again, you just, marketing and sales is about rejection, right? That's the name of the game. So you just have to keep going, and kind of just look at each rejection as like one extra point that you earn, right? And being one step closer to that goal of yours. So Shiva's question, so which after I mentioned it, I think now it has 9 upvotes. So it's really popular, about portfolios, of course. What is the best format to build portfolios? Should we have a website for applying and a slide deck to present case studies during the interviews?
I think the portfolio is a little more general, like I mentioned earlier. And then the case study is usually a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote deck or whatever. And that's more tailored to the job that you're applying for. So I would say both are really important.
Thank you, Stacey.
Yeah, I'm going to riff off that too. I mean, the great thing with a keynote or PowerPoint, you can throw some animation in there. If you have a few different case studies, depends where you are, you can actually start to curate. Typically, you will need 2 case studies when you're walking through the door for an interview. You may only just show one and talk through one. But in case there's something like, hey, do you have another example where you could show this, or that? You have something in your back pocket that you can pull out from. And the other key thing is they've already seen your portfolio online. Why are you going to try to show it to them again? So don't do that. The other thing is like, hey, I want to walk you through my portfolio. What's the password to your Wi-Fi? I'm trying to log in. 15 minutes goes by. Sorry, I can't get onto the Wi-Fi here because you're just trying to pull up the Wi-Fi on your laptop while you're in an interview. So that's another reason why you want to have a PDF, PowerPoint, or Keynote of your case study, just that you can walk in, you're prepared, and it's curated to the kind of storytelling that you want to, and you're able to jump around because maybe someone more specifically is, hey, I'm really just more interested, do you have examples of user journeys? And can you take me through those? Instead of you going from start to finish, maybe they just want to see how you handle or certain aspects of that, because that's what they need someone to come in and start working on tomorrow with. So also be prepared that you may in your mind want to go from A to Z in this straight line of storytelling, but someone may just take you and ask you specific questions or ask you to show certain examples of work that you've done. So just be prepared for that as well.
Thank you, Darren. Linda.
Yeah, I would say, well, it's like necessary. It doesn't really matter the format. It's the content actually that matters. So I've seen like having a portfolio website is very common. So almost everyone have it, but I've also seen people using a PDF. That's also fine. So I would say what we like people really want to see is now how beautiful you create this website or like a portfolio. It's like we want to see like how do you solve a problem. So the key things is like show you like a design thinking and the problem solving skills in that portfolio. That's the most important. And have a slide deck. It would be great to do the presentation, because usually a portfolio is like you have to scroll up and down and to move around. But you could tailor those like a presentation deck to your presentation, which slide you want to show more things, or which side you may just want to go through very quick. You could really control that. So if you have, I would say have both if possible. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. So just to recap on that question that Shiva was asking, is basically, yes, you need to have both the website with your case studies and a deck, which you'll be maybe customizing for particular interviews. So you'll have like a few case studies, and as Darren was mentioning, you'll typically present one or maybe two. So that's a great format. That's what we follow in the program as well. It's basically preparing you both, being able to show your case studies in your online portfolio, and then mastering the portfolio presentation as well. So presenting the slides. Okay, so let's do one quick audience question. So I see there is another question from Thana. Is it Thana or Athena? Correct me if I'm mispronouncing the name, please. My most recent job search seems to want a highly diverse set of skills. Some want a UI, UX, web designer, and app developer all in one. Are these red flags in a company?
I call that the unicorn request.
Run away.
I would say that is so impossible to have an individual person like tackle so many different roles, but also it sounds more like a potentially like a startup company maybe. But yeah, to Darren's point, run for your life. I don't know. I've seen where a majority of companies are kind of like blending the UX and UI roles together. And, I think it all depends on what are your skill sets, what interests you, what do you want to do on a daily basis, and, focus on that. And, as you go through your job search and you're reviewing different positions, just make sure that you read all the details and requirements for that position, because if you notice, like, for instance, that they're asking, it says potentially like UX designer, but then as you read through it, it looks like they're looking more for like an app developer rather than a UX designer, then that's not the role for you.
Yeah, this is a great point. So also want to take a question from Melanie, because it's a great question as well. Does it matter how candidates got their UX education, i.e. a boot camp versus college versus other different ways of getting education?
Yeah, I would say I don't think so, though some are better than others. It would depend on, it's a good question. I think it's a specific question based on what you are capable of doing and have the time and the sort of the means to do. I think they all have their benefits. I don't think you're precluded of finding a job if you pick one or the other. It's just a matter of making sure that you truly understand and are committed to whatever you decide you're going to go with. You really have to. You have to commit to learning and the practicing to this point, and I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Stacy.
So, well, it really depends. So I was seeing in some industry, I was seeing some hiring managers, they have their own preference. Like for our company's AI and the machine learning team, they would prefer like candidates to have like some college or master backgrounds like to that job, that would be understandable. But most of point, like if you meet the minimal requirement, like I think it's like usually a college degree or at least 2 years, like a equivalent experience, so that would be fine. And for me, I think this as far as you get to the hiring manager's interview, I don't think that really matters. So yes, if you do apply for some like a machine learning or AI or like a very high tech savvy things, like they probably have some, but generally it's kind of same.
Thank you, Linda. So now I can actually, last time I was reading Melanie's question, it disappeared somewhere. So now I can see there's another great part to that question, and what candidates do to stand out from other applicants, right? So basically just to address that really quick, and before I let you guys provide some insights, basically just focus on what we covered in the beginning of this session, right? So just use that simple roadmap, use those competencies, build yourself up, and to kind of come back to what we covered in case you weren't here, hard skills, right? Softer skills, make sure those are all demonstrated and shown, especially soft skills, because a lot of people miss those, like communication, presentation, the ability to deal with stakeholders, right? So make sure that is all shown on your resume and on your portfolio, right? And also experience building, right? So make yourself less junior, right? Make yourself stand out, become more marketable compared to other candidates, right? And that's what we basically do in the program. But you can also, again, as I mentioned before, but you can do something similar on your own. It's just harder, it takes longer, but it's possible to do it, right? You can volunteer, you can do pro bono projects. Ultimately, right, again, we surveyed tons of candidates, spoke with hundreds of candidates. It all comes down to your portfolio, your experience, and your skills, right? So, and in terms of education, when colleges can work, right, is like usually, if it's like a top school and you have like HCI degree or something, yeah, that can definitely help, right? The question is, if you're transitioning careers, if you're like already in your basically switching from one career to another, right? Do you really want to spend another few years and a few hundred or like $100,000 on getting that master's, for example, right? So it can help, but if it's not a top school, if it's, then it can help, but it's not going to be a huge difference. Again, the key parts are it's usually still helpful to have that check mark, because most employers, they still do look for that check mark. Higher education, check, right? So you have some type of bachelor's degree, so they basically have some proof that you can go through a lot of material and study and learn and blah blah blah, right? It's a quick and easy and lazy basically way for them to just see that, right, and verify and filter people like that. But then in reality, again, it comes down to experience, skills, and your portfolio and case studies, great comprehensive case studies. You guys want to, I know it's kind of like answered for a little longer than I was planning. Do you guys have anything to add?
Just want to refer back what I mentioned, like how to make yourself stand out, find like 30, 50 resumes and find the best several of them and make your resumes like as good as those. So that would help like you really stand out like from the first round.
Yeah, it's a great point. And basically, yeah, if you decide to do like pro bono work, volunteer, it doesn't have to be for nonprofits, it can be for any startup, right, that just needs help, right? We recommend working with tech companies, with like product type of companies, or with like applications, right? So that's more than, it's not just a site, right, that is static, right? That can be great too, but it's better if it's something dynamic, like a dynamic web application or mobile application or some other application, where you can actually, take things through the UX process, where you can have flows and interactions and stuff like that. Those are going to be typically stronger case studies based on our experience. Also, as Linda mentioned, find a team, ideally find a mentor if you want to save time, so you don't just like move in the wrong direction and it doesn't take you forever. And also make sure that you have access to key stakeholders in the company and they're on board, right? And you negotiate any NDA stuff in the beginning up front, right? So you don't learn 3 months later that you cannot show this in your portfolio, right? After you've done all that work. So basically, those are some important points. So what I also wanted to, because we're running a little bit short on time, love speaking with you guys. This is a huge topic. We could basically chat about this for a very long time. So it's always hard to find a balance between, making this too short, and then on the other hand, not making these events too long, right? Because we definitely want to give you guys tons of insights, tons of value. So it's actually a very useful event for you, not just another superficial 5-minute thing. In terms of interviews, what was the most challenging part for you during the interviewing process?
I think we kind of shed light on this a little bit, but when you're on your interview, you really have to be prepared and practice beforehand how you're going to present your work, because I could guarantee you that a question would arise and will stop you in mid-sentence, and you do not know how to talk or speak through it, and that could really affect your interview potentially. So I would definitely say practice, reach out to a friend or a colleague, and just make sure that, at least from a presentation / storytelling perspective, that you kind of have a sense of how you're going to approach talking through your work. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think, for example, if you did affinity mapping as part of your case study, you just go, oh, hey, we did affinity mapping. Okay, that's cute. But it's more about how did the affinity mapping process, what did you learn out of it? What was the takeaway that helped move the project forward, that informed the next phase of the project? So it's really about not what you did, but it's more about like what was learned from that and how did it inform that next phase in the project. So if you think about each aspect as little blocks of information, and you really learn to talk about each one individually versus thinking about everything linearly, in a linear process, I think that's going to really help you. I've gotten thrown off where someone's asked me to focus or talk about one key aspect of a project and how I handled that. And that broke my rhythm. So you should be able to think about that. Like, think about talking about each phase. User journeys, great. Wireframes, great. So you could be able to talk about that, but then once again, how it informed the work, what was learned, and then how did it evolve to that final high fidelity prototype.
Thank you, Darren. So I see that. So I want to take a few more questions. We're running a bit short on time, but we still have time for a couple of questions or so, or maybe a few more from the audience. Maybe we'll take more, later on. So I see that Heather asked, so I'm gonna, Heather, ask your questions kind of all together. What UX professional associations or social networks do you belong to? And second question from Heather is, any favorite books or websites or any content in general on UX or UX writing? So professional associations and social networks, and any books, websites, or content you recommend.
I would say website, Nielsen Norman Group. I think that's a great website. If anyone has yet to go, hear of it, definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'll add to that. As far as UX information and getting different perspectives from different types of UX professionals, I go to Medium, which is a website that, it's like a content publishing sort of reporting website. And there's a lot of different types of professional UX writers and designers that will post information there, whether it's their experiences or you know, and any manner of UX information. And there's certain groups of people that you can follow, like the UX Collective on Medium. So I think that's a great resource for me.
Yeah, UXPA is also UXPA, IXDA, and Mika, maybe you could type that into chat. So basically, User Experience Professionals Association, Interaction Design Association. Those can be great. I think Linda, you wanted to share something as well.
Oh yeah. I want to agree with Melissa. Like Nielsen Norman Group is very useful website, especially you are designing for specific things. And also UX Collective, I also check that website a lot. And for the groups, I didn't like really belong to any two association or groups, but I'd love to. Actually, before pandemic, I'd love to go to Meetup and to meet some different UX designers there.
Thank you, Linda. Darren, want to recommend any resources, professional associations or networks or sites, anything?
I'm just pasting things in here. There's a I guess a couple of books, How to Build Habit Forming Products. And it really helps you understand the behaviors of why people do certain things, why they form habits, what are the triggers, what are the little signifiers that might be required to pull someone into an experience, how to hold someone into an experience. So that definitely is one of my favorite books that I like to recommend if you haven't read it already.
And just want to add one more thing, just came to my mind, like LinkedIn, they also have some LinkedIn courses, and you may need some time to search like for a good one, but it's also a good resource could use.
So I also want to take this question from George. Should you tailor your portfolio to a specific type of role within UX, such as UX researcher, for example?
If you want to focus on research, which is a very specialized field, it's going out, there's aspects of that, and it's also and some of it's also called UX strategist, depends where you're looking for work. And I think Melissa also called that. Not every role is called exactly the same, and you'll start to see that. But if you're going to be conducting surveys, interviews, card sorting, synthesized data, comparative, that's a very research focus aspect of UX. So it's not, then if that's something that interests you, then yes, by all means. I think you really just need to understand the various disciplines of UX or the types of UX. Do some research and see what really excites you, and then take it from there. But I'm sure someone else is going to add a little bit more color to that.
Thank you, Darren. Anyone else wants to add anything?
I would say like I don't know if it's like just a mean for UX researcher, then yes, because UX researchers is like a different role as UX designer or product designer, or like those are two different things. If you really want to focus on UX designer, like a researcher, you need to have like at your portfolio showing that you have done like at least 3 projects as a UX researcher. So that would be helpful. If you want to do the researcher and you show like a UX design, those like products, I don't think that really helps. But if you are talking about a product designer, UX designer, UX or UI designer, I would say those are kind of like a very same thing, just like a name differences. But if you are referring to become a UI designer, then that is another story. So it really depends on like what you really want to do. You can like say, I want to do search for a job for UX designer at the same time for the UX researcher. That would be hard. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda. All right, so let's take a couple more quick questions, and yeah, then we can tell you more about the program we're running, because it's could be a great opportunity for some of you folks, as basically promised in the beginning. So I see that's, oh, here's a good question from Bay. I'm in the process of finishing my case studies, and I think I'm almost there, but I'm afraid to move forward because I'm worried I'm not good at it. How can I overcome it?
You just have to practice. It's not, it's difficult. The first few times are hard, but Linda, Melissa, Darren all mentioned practice. I would absolutely say the more you practice, the better you will be. And I believe it. Believe in yourself, please.
Yeah, just be patient. Definitely be patient with yourself. Linda mentioned earlier, like, look at 10 different examples of other people's work. Get to really understand what good looks like in terms of a good UX case study. Look at some of senior roles, senior portfolios, not junior, and don't definitely look at a director's portfolio, because that's going to be more driven towards more analytics. So look more for like the mid to senior and really start to understand what good looks like. And not just look at 1, look at 10, look at 20, start to see the commonalities. You have your own approach or way or giving personality to who you are. So, see what works for you, and then adapt. See these examples and then adapt and then make it your own.
Thank you, Darren. Melissa.
I would definitely agree with everyone here on the panel. Patience is something that you definitely need to have, especially in the job search. You're going to get a lot of rejections, and you might get closer and then a rejection, or you might just go and get the job. So I think believe in yourself, have patience, and be understanding, and don't be too hard on yourself. I think that's important.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, I just want to say that just finish the case study, present it, practice it, iterate on it, treat it just like you would a UX project, any other UX job that you would use the same process on. Finish it, practice it, find where it's not working, modify, present it again, that whole circular process.
Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, just to kind of recap all of that, right? So basically, what you just need to do is finish up the case study and keep going, keep moving forward. Like, what is there to lose, right? I mean, just look at this whole experience as training, as practicing, right? If you don't start, it's guaranteed that you will not go anywhere, right? So if you do start and move forward, right, then maybe you will not succeed right away, but eventually, right, if you just look at it as training and practice, that's what really helps me. Just looking at that some rejection is unavoidable, learn from it, grow from it, always get back up after you fall down, and then keep going, right? And then just you'll improve and grow, and ultimately you'll reach your goal, right? And so hopefully that's helpful. So on that note, I know we're running out of time. So I wanted to thank our awesome speakers so much. This was really awesome. And I wanted to kind of, for the audience, I wanted to say that hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great tips on searching for UX for your first UX role. As promised earlier, let me just quickly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build an amazing real client portfolio and robust experience, but also get some crucial career prep necessary to actually land that first UX job. So basically what's BeginX is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real mission-driven client projects designed to help people transition into UX roles without quitting their jobs in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, compared to like programs that cost tens of thousands or 10 to 15,000 or something like that. It's much more affordable. So we ran multiple cohorts and helped over 130 people so transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by Great companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, JP Morgan, Meta, Facebook, many others. Recently, we've also been ranked by SwitchUp as their best UX program. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, Publicis Sapient, The Economist, and many others. Who the program is best for? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or are willing to learn those independently and save a few $1,000s that way, basically, before you get started. Or you come from a design, research, creative, tech-related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and affordable ways and without quitting your current job. We're also pretty selective, and look for motivated and committed team players. What you gain after completing the program is you build not just hard skills, but critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and get ready to land a UX job. And in fact, our grads have done so well that we offer a money-back guarantee as well. So basically, you land the UX job, or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200 on top of that. So you get some lunch money as well. if it sounds like you may be a good candidate. You can learn more at on beginx.com. So with that said, we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you guys updated about our upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent out every few weeks or so. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful guest speakers for taking their time to join and provide all these valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you guys here. If anyone has any other quick questions, we may be able to hang around for maybe like a couple of more minutes or so to just like quickly address anything else. All right, so we still have lots of people on. So maybe we can, do you guys want to also take a look at Q&A section and see if you really resonate with any of the questions? I see that Lane is asking a question as well. Any insights on the pros and cons of working for different sized companies, number of employers and age of company for your first UX job? Any other specific characteristics to look for and prioritize for the best first-time experience and growth?
I think Stacy kind of answered this earlier, but for me, I look for a company that has an established structure where I'm going to be able to go in, where I'm going to be able to learn and grow. If you do it, you walk in and you're the UXer of one in a small startup, you're probably going to lose your mind. You want to be able to work in an environment where there's process set up, there's ways of working, there's people around you that could help you mentor and help you grow as a creative. There's the tools and resources that you will need to set you up for success. Those are the things that you should be kind of considering. I know you're anxious to get your foot in the door, but you know, find that balance of what really works for you and thinking short and long term.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, I would also add to that basically don't try to be perfectionist at it, and don't try to be a perfectionist at this transition in general, because it will take you 5 times longer if you basically like Google 80-20 rule, and you'll find out why. But in reality, what we advise to a lot of people is just get that first UX role, right? You don't really have the luxury to be like too picky at first, right? Once you have your foot in the door, once you're in the industry, it gets much easier, right? You have to start having recruiters reaching out to you, you can move around easier, etc. So basically, if you have this ideal company and ideal role in mind, right, you can get there, but it doesn't have to be that first role. Because if you do that, you can just like waste a lot of time, and we'll still end up settling on something that is not perfect, very likely.
Yeah, I think it's also important to keep in mind that what you think might be the perfect role, it might not be, and to spend all your energy working for or towards a specific thing that you think is perfect based on the assumptions and information that you might have tangentially doesn't mean that once you get in there, it doesn't have the same issues that you would find anywhere else. So just keep that in mind. There really is no perfect role. You can learn everywhere, and yeah.
Thank you, Stacy. All right, let's take one last quick question. I know it's already late, and we're probably all tired as well. So this is kind of about future and different technologies, right? And not necessarily like pure job search related, right? But Elijah is asking, has Web3 or mixed reality altered the way you all do work currently? Just considering how quickly and adaptable one must be with new platforms and tools. So maybe if the first part is not applicable, maybe you can answer the second.
So this is an industry where you'll never stop learning. Today we were just looking at the new interaction patterns where we were thinking about putting a sticky button at the bottom of a mobile device, but now that Apple has the URL, like when you start to swipe up, it comes up, and then how does that react with our sticky CTA that we want to put at the bottom? Long story short, you're constantly having to learn and adapt to the technology that is ever evolving. How do you create experiences for that? You know, I saw in here someone was mentioning XR and Web3. Web3 jobs are off the charts, or they're about to be. They're just waiting for like legal compliance and a whole bunch of other things to kind of clear the way. AR/VR has been around. I've worked in AR/VR for years, but it just never really had traction. But now Meta and the metaverse, that's a whole other space to be designing for. Do you know that Nike, I don't know what it was, like $70 million they just made in revenue from the metaverse? I think about that. Who were the designers, the UX designers that were creating the experiences that help set Nike up for success in that environment, right? So, you know, you constantly have to keep learning. Someone had mentioned, and it was an article in some tech magazine, where they compared UX and experience designers to doctors or people in the medical industry, where with the new technologies and new advancements, you're constantly having to learn and stay relevant. You know, it's a wonderful challenge. And I think the big thing for me, and I could probably say for the people on the call, we get paid to do something that we love, and we're constantly being challenged just about every day. So be patient with yourself, because if you feel this is for you, it's exciting. Well, that's it.
Thank you, Darren. It looks like Melissa, you muted yourself. Did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I actually,
Or you forgot to mute?
oh yeah, I did. I would agree with Darren. I think it's so interesting. We had a conversation about the metaverse and also NTFs, for example. And yeah, we're constantly evolving and changing. So it's just a matter of, you know, how you as an individual kind of adapt and evolve with the changes as well. And if it interests you and if you believe in it and want to do it, then go for it.
Thank you so much, Melissa. So any other quick tips? I know we're about a couple of minutes over time. Any other quick tips or lessons you guys really want to share with the audience before we wrap up completely?
Just reiterating, just look at people's examples. Really understand what annotating and calling out, you know, aspects of an experience. That's truly important, because you're not there to explain that to someone who's looking at your case study for the very first time before you get called into an interview. You know, to iterate what Stacy had mentioned earlier, it's really just surfacing that rationale behind your design decision making, making it clear, making it concise. Those are some of the things that you really just have to keep in mind.
Thanks, Darren. Awesome. So thank you guys again so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I could speak with you forever and explore and interview you about all these different challenges and successes of your career transitions, but we do have to wrap up. Thank you again, everyone in the audience, for joining us. It was really great to have you here, and we'll see you at our next virtual event. Cheers.